back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Cullington, and joining me, as always, Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. I mean, the playoffs are on. It's a great time of year. First round is wrapping up. It's time for us to do another show, you know?
It's been a fun couple of weeks of hockey. We do have some Flyers news to get into, but it really is going to be a playoff-centric show. There's really not a whole lot of Flyers talk. Before we get into anything, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Hit all the buttons. Follow us everywhere. SportsTalkPhilly.com. All the things. Okay. Getting right into it. Not a whole lot of preamble today. Flyers president search. That's really the only big story. We're still kind of operating under the assumption that Danny Briere is going to be the general manager.
Right.
And I don't really think there's a whole lot of names floating around in that conversation.
No, I mean,
but as far as the president goes, it is a little bit more of an open book there.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of bits and pieces that you kind of have to assemble together with all of these things. I mean, it was really kind of active the last week or so because it really feels like the interview process is ongoing at this point now, like they're into it. I mean, obviously, I guess the first thing to say is yes, to this point, Danny Briere has not officially been named the GM. It still seems like all signs point to this. There is a kind of a belief that they're waiting to hire the president, and then that way they can kind of make it seem like it kind of is a complete all on board thing, that then the president decides, I'm going to drop the interim tag. There is no search, that kind of thing. Instead of doing it in reverse order, they're going to try to do it maybe a different way.
Okay.
The first thing I think that really needs to be talked about, and I got a few places to, credit and cite for a lot of this information, but is the concept that this may not be the traditional president of hockey operations. Everybody, when you think of president of hockey operations, what you think of is it's a role that oversees the whole thing, oversees the general manager, the assistant general manager or managers, scouting, development, all of this, everything. The belief is, and I want to give credit, the guys at Snow the goalie really had this first and foremost, I would say, that this is maybe more geared toward the business side of things, that, almost that this would be somebody who more or less helps to market the team in a way. It's really interesting, kind of, the idea that this person may almost be like an internal PR director within the hockey side of things that works kind of with the business side too. So it's not your traditional, and here's where it kind of makes sense, because when you can read into that part of it what you will, but when you consider who's leading the search, as far as we know, and again, similar reports, Snow the goalie had some stuff, Anthony DeMarco had stuff, that the search is predominantly being led by Dan Hilferty, Val Camillo, and then you have Billy King and Neil Glassberg, who are both working for outside kind of consulting agencies that are involved. Neil Glassberg, if anybody recalls, when we talked about John Tortorella getting hired over the last summer, he is the founder of the Coaches Agency, which is the kind of the coaching and, assistant coach and executive representation, if you will. So, they're adding perspective for better or worse. And the worst is that for a little while anyway, and we'll get into the reason why it's not anymore, there was a potential conflict of interest in play. So how about some names? You want to get into some names, or do you want to react to that first?
Before we hit some names, I do want to mention that it does kind of make sense that you're heading towards maybe more of a business-oriented person for this role, because let's be honest, the team, at least over the short period of time here, is probably not going to do particularly well on the ice. Mm-hmm. And we know that historically that means that the building gets pretty empty and the StubHub prices get pretty cheap. And so it makes a little sense that you're bringing in somebody who's going to be focused on, how are we going to get the building full? How are we going to be trying to make money while the on-ice product isn't necessarily the thing getting the butts in the seats?
Right. And you know what? The first thought that I had, and this is not a name that's involved in the interview process as far as we know anyway, because I haven't heard it to this point, but I feel like this is where Eric Lindros came from when it was speculated at the beginning. if you're looking for
I
somebody
agree.
who's resonating with a fan base and trying to boost some business and doesn't necessarily need all of the hockey operations smarts, then
Right.
that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Like, so maybe that's where the name, like that name came from way back at the beginning with the idea that maybe they're going to go there. Now it's not part, like Lindros doesn't seem like he's part of this anymore. We'll get into that. So how about
Right.
some names? You want to go
Well,
through some
for the
names?
record,
Um,
for the record, for the Lindros ending up as whenever George Peros moves on, I could see him being the next president of player safety or
for
director
all
of
of
player
his work
safety.
with concussions and things like that, you're saying?
And he's done a
Yeah, I
ton
mean,
of work. He knows
well,
a ton about the information, and in a league that's heading towards the protected stars era, or at least it very well should be, who knows more about protecting stars than Eric Lindros?
for a league that is consistently inconsistent at kind of enforcing the very rules that they should. I mean, like, and not for nothing, and I'm not trying to jump to all of our playoff stuff, and this is really not a footnote of the series I'm going to get into throughout the course of it, but we just had a player in a series fracture his neck in the middle of a game on a minor penalty call, no
Yep.
suspension, and
Yep.
somehow or other, by the way, try to come back and play in the middle of it, which I think is nothing more than the
Insane.
player. I think is nothing more than the player kind of just trying to tough it out as they
Player's
usually
gonna
do.
play. Yep.
But regardless, if you're supposed to be protecting your players and a guy fractures his neck on a hit that should never happen in a game and be an
Nope.
immediate 5 in game and suspension worthy, then
Ugly.
what are we doing here? You
Yep.
know, like that's where you're right.
All right. Let's
So
get
let's
some
get into the
president
real names.
names. Yes.
Well, the first part of it was when the interviews got started was that Emily Castengay and Scott Mellenby were two names that were out there that definitely interviewed.
Okay.
Now I'm going to just jump. I'm just going to cut to the chase right away and say that within a matter of days, Emily Castengay was no longer in the running anyway. She decided
informed the
to
Vancouver
stay
Canucks
in
that
Vancouver.
she was staying with them. Yep.
Correct. Now I got nothing on Scott Mellenby. He's interviewed. Seems like he wants to be potentially part of this. I mean, the interesting thing about Mellenby to me is now, first of all, right away, I'll go into him in a minute. Let's just keep going with the names. Because Doug Wilson was supposed to be potentially getting an interview. I'm not sure if that's happened yet. I believe it likely has because it sounded like it was maybe over last weekend.
Doug Wilson looking to get back into hockey, obviously,
Yep.
after taking some time off to get healthy.
Yep. And then while Emily Castengay's name was linked to this whole thing, so was Cami Granados, who's also an assistant GM in Vancouver. Some have actually gone so far as to say that potentially she could be the front runner in terms of their interest level, which is interesting. Dave Poulin's name has been brought up. Obviously, we've heard Ray Sherrow's name being linked. Again, there's not really a clear-cut report out there that he actually got an interview, but and then there's a belief that Sherrow would like to be a GM again, not necessarily a president of hockey operations. So maybe this isn't the right spot for him.
He might
I
look
do
at
want
that as a bit of a retirement promotion.
Sure, and I do want to clarify, by the way. So the report that Emily Castengay was staying in Vancouver, that was Elliot Friedman who said that on 32 Thoughts. So let's wipe that one out. So let's kind of get into some of these so I'll start with Scott Mellenby, and Mellenby's an interesting one to me because I think before everybody freaks out about the fact that he played for the Flyers in the 80s, because I know everybody's going to do that. That's the last connection he has to the Flyers. Once he was traded away, now over 30 years ago, he hasn't been tied to the Flyers organization in any way since, other than maybe to make an alumni appearance, like at an alumni game. Like, that's it. He's risen through the ranks in hockey operations sides of things. He's been actually even further than that. He's been an assistant coach at one point, then an assistant GM, director of player personnel. He did all that with Montreal. If you recall, with Montreal, when everything was starting to blow up around Marc Bergevin, everybody thought that Mellenby was getting the job, and when it was apparent he wasn't, he resigned. Yep. He stepped away.
He thought he was getting that job for sure.
Sure. And this is a guy, like, he knows hockey operations. He did that assistant GM job in Montreal for, I believe, 7 years. Like, then you know what you're doing in that circle. You kind of know how a front office is supposed to operate.
That's one of those franchises, man. Like, Montreal knows how the league runs.
Well, sure, exactly.
That's not just any old front office.
So, and you're going to hear me say this a lot in the next couple minutes. The key question is, what do the Flyers want in the role? Because if they want it on the more traditional side, then Mellenby sounds like a great candidate. But if it's more PR and marketing kind of guy stuff, like I'm not sure that that's Scott Mellenby. I don't know him to be.
Ron Hextall.
Oh, jeez. I haven't heard. Now, I heard that name for a day and then didn't.
Probably mostly on Twitter.
Exact. Well, yeah. But either way. But I'm not sure. Like, I don't get that. Like, in fairness, I don't get that impression from Scott Mellenby that he's the marketing PR guy.
Right.
I totally get him as the hockey operations guy.
Sure.
Now, Poulin is in a similar situation in terms of, yes, he's a former Flyer captain, but again, once he left, been in a bunch of different roles with a bunch of different places. We know him certainly on the broadcasting side now with TSN and all the stuff he's done over there. He worked for the Toronto Maple Leafs for a little while. Certainly has great knowledge of the game and where it's going and all that type of stuff. And maybe he even fits that PR side a little better because of, you broadcast, you're an ex-player, an ex-captain of the team. That all lines up, right? Like that makes a lot of sense. I want to say right up front, that's kind of all I have on Poulin, by the way, but I want to say right up front, if you're asking me who I think the perfect candidate for the job is based on all these names, it's Doug Wilson. By a freaking mile. Like in terms of, he feels like the perfect candidate in terms of experienced general manager to put right near Danny Briere and say, here's how you do it. And my only question would be, how good is his health? Like obviously he's interviewing, so he's got to feel a lot better, but...
Well, and the nice thing is this is also a position that doesn't necessarily require as much day-to-day oversight necessarily.
Sure. And for me, as long as he's able to do the job, I'd be making the push for him. But again, it's is that what they want?
Is that what he wants? Or does Doug Wilson want to stay in the San Jose Sharks kind of family? Because I feel like he feels like there's some unfinished business there.
He might. I don't know. I mean, I don't get the impression, and I don't know what the story is back there to kind of indicate how, I don't want to say like how willing they're welcoming him back with open arms kind of thing, because I don't think it was ever, it wasn't like contentious.
Right. And it seems like he's been kind of hanging out around their front office since he's been showing an interest in getting back involved. Since he's gotten, to whatever stage of his, I'm not sure where he's at in his treatment, but he's gotten to whatever stage of that he's gotten to. It'll be interesting to see if he's willing to move out of San Jose, California to come run this dumpster fire of a team kind of thing. So we'll see.
And you have like the question you have to ask with that type of stuff is very much the same question, like in terms of a John Tortorella question. It's like, if John Tortorella sounds motivated, like look at the opportunity I have to bring this back to what it used to be. I'm going to run with that. If that's the way you're thinking, then that's the way you're thinking. But yeah, we can't get inside of their heads to figure out if that's how they're thinking.
Well, I also think that John Tortorella was sold a false bill of goods and has simply tried to make the best of it since he's been here.
Yeah, but he's also the type of guy who's stubborn enough to not back down from the challenge once he gets in. I
absolutely agree with you.
So
that's why I'm saying he's making the best.
That's kind of where you're at with that, right?
But I absolutely thought that he was walking into a team that was just
a superstar away, maybe,
or a coaching change away,
Well, no, see, I don't think he felt like they were a coaching change away, but I think he thought that let's put it this way.
I thought he could get more out of the team that he inherited than he could.
Well, no, I'll give you a good reason why he thought that, why he may have thought that, because he thought he was going to have Sean Couturier, and he thought he was going to have Cam Atkinson, and then all of a sudden somebody had to tell him, you're not going to have those guys all year.
And they
what
probably told him he was going to have Ryan Ellis too.
Apparently now anybody can have Ryan Ellis if the price is
right. Is there a price? Or are you going to drive him to the airport?
Yeah, no, the need to desperately get to the cap floor if you're a team out there that needs it. That's about what it is.
The only price is going to be the Uber to the airport. Okay, so back to the president search here.
Yeah, right.
If you're picking today, who do you think is getting the job? If you had to put money on it right now, I know it's still kind of wide open.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't. No, I don't have like a good feel on where it's going because I think that there's more than just the handful of names that we're talking about. I do want to bring up Cami Granado as the option that she is also because it's an interesting option,
Yeah,
and we kind of talked about this really briefly before we started the show. First of all, similar to Casting Gay, working in the same organization at the moment, same role. Look, you'd be getting a legend of the sport, a legend of U.S. women's hockey if you and in having her oversee this department. And it
absolutely.
and it's very outside the box for the Flyers. And
In a
I
good way.
kind of right, and I kind of think that would benefit them. I think it might be a breath of fresh air for a team that and a franchise that really kind of needs it. And look, she's in and this is what we were talking about before we started. She's in every hockey circle imaginable, comes from a hockey family. She's married to Ray Ferraro. She's worked in hockey for her entire life, has continued to climb the ranks in the last several years. And I think that you've got a reasonable, legitimate candidate there. Like, I don't think that that's one that you just brush aside at all.
I agree with you. I think she's experienced and she would bring a lot to the role.
You know what else I'll say about her too? I think she could fit the bill of like being on both sides of the spectrum, being able to kind of do the businessy PR side of things because you're a promoter of the game at that point. Your
Absolutely.
place in history is your place in history, right? But you're also a smart hockey person, like that's kind of part of the job too. So I think that's all part of the equation. I think that if they can find somebody who can do both, that's really where you're hitting the sweet spot. So that's really where everything is. I don't really have much more Flyer stuff beyond that, to be honest. I mean, look, I'm not because one thing I am not going to do over the course of this offseason is kind of get heavily invested in a bunch of trade rumors until we really start seeing stuff attraction here.
Right.
Like nothing's happening right now. I know, and I'm not trying to sit here and dismiss what that Ryan Ellis is available, for example. No, that's all very legit. And there's plenty of other names that are going to be available, but I am not trying to speculate who stays, who goes, this, that, the other thing right now.
No,
they don't even
won't
have a
happen
guy
during the playoffs.
and they don't even have the interim tag off of Danny Briere yet. I don't think he's exactly taking swings for the fences right this second.
Nothing big is going to happen with nobody like officially in charge.
Right.
So can we get into the fun stuff now? I
Yep.
feel like we have we've eaten our vegetables, right? We've talked about the Flyers. We have done our chores. Now we get to have the fun stuff.
And the thing was I knew coming into tonight when we were going to do the show, 15 minutes on Flyer stuff. Just give me 15 minutes on here's where we're at with all this stuff because we're going to take 2 weeks off from talking about it. Let's get into the fun stuff. There you go.
And the fun stuff is the Stanley Cup playoffs. So,
Hey, you want to talk about a former Flyer coach?
We will. Let me start here. Well, so full disclosure, we are recording on Monday evening. We are recording during Devils Rangers. And
Starting the show.
For that reason, it's currently about halfway through the game right now. It's currently 4-on-4. For that reason, we are going to start out on the Western Conference. We're going to start with the West Coast games and work our way to the East. So where are we starting here? We are starting with the one, the only, the goatee himself, Mr. Dave Hackstall.
Dude, the goatee's got to go so bad.
Goatee, baby.
It's got to go so bad, but nonetheless, this was a fun freaking series. Let me tell you, this was fun.
Yeah.
And I'm, obviously both of us, the best thing that could happen is I know you're reacting to something that
Devils just scored shorthanded. We'll get there.
We'll get there. The thing that's because full disclosure, we left the last show and I even said, can't wait to see how wrong we are with all of the predictions we made. Well, this is one that we both got wrong because I don't think we had the defending Stanley Cup champions bowing out in round one.
And I'm pretty sure I said on the show, maybe I'm wrong because we were all wrong about Vegas. And maybe I'm making the same mistake we all made 3, 4, 5 years ago, whatever year that was, 2017. Time is a flat circle. And made the same mistake. and we'll get into their second round matchup as we move on a little bit further here. But
sure.
But I don't know. I'm probably going to make the same mistake again, but I don't know. I don't know how good I feel about it. So my manager at work is a former semi-pro high-level hockey player, and I kind of gotten him back into the NHL a little bit over the last year and a half or so. And he asked me, he's like, "So what's the deal with Seattle? Like, what's their thing?" You know, he doesn't watched a lot this season.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, I said they don't really have a super duper star, although Matty Beniers is trying.
He will become one
At least in the
eventually,
regular
I
season,
think.
right?
It's the issue is with them is when you put them next to a team like Colorado, and even though Colorado was missing a lot, I mean, they really were missing. I mean,
yeah,
and it only got worse as the series went on. Let's be real.
That's the one team that shouldn't overreact from a first round exit. Like the
No,
Colorado Avalanche can come back next year with the same exact squad, and they're going to win in the first round more times than not.
No, and I can't fault them for what for what happened. I mean, there's a couple of things that go into the formula that Seattle followed that just end up working. One really good one is score first in every game. That usually tends to help a little bit. But toward the end of it, and this is how crippled they were down the stretch. I mean, they played, and let's just say Makar got suspended for a game in the middle of it too. That doesn't help.
Makar got suspended for game 6, wasn't he, or was it game 5?
No, I think it was 4 or 5. Yeah, either 4 or 5. It was one.
I thought the hit was in game 4 and he was suspended. For
then
5.
That might have been it. Yeah, and because it was a game that they ended up losing. That Colorado lost, and they won game 6 when he came back. I believe you're right. So, but the thing about that is that after a while, especially down the stretch, Colorado won game 2, and I remember the way game 6 went. Also, same thing. There was a bunch of different people scoring for Colorado in those games, but after a while, I was watching some of the other ones and going, "Is anybody else other than Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen going to score a goal?"
That they kind of just looked out of gas, and I know they played a lot of hockey last year, and they played really hard down the stretch to get in, to make to win the division, to get where they got. Mm-hmm. And I think the injuries just caught up to them. Like I said, Seattle just plays such good team hockey, such good grinded out, almost, I don't want to say poor man's, especially given the results, but they almost feel like the West Coast New York Islanders.
A little bit, yeah. That's a good comparison.
They just kind of grind you down, and they don't have anybody doing anything special but Brock Nelson and,
eventually Matthew Barzal and...
Right.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I'm not talking about the Matthew Barzal. Matthew Barzal has some skill and some flashiness. I'm talking about your Brock Nelson.
Matthew Barzal is Matty Beniers, and is to Matty Beniers anyway. And then Brock Nelson is to... Well, and this guy didn't get to really play much in the series, but roster. Is to I was gonna say is to Jared McCann, because that's really the guy I think of. But man, exactly. And look, if you're gonna go to the injury list for Colorado, I think where you start is Gabe Landeskog. I mean, you have to play. Yeah. Well, because we're gonna get into a series. We're gonna get into a series in probably a couple minutes. Really, it might be the next one we get into, where it's the opposite. What happens when you get your captain back for the playoffs versus, he's not coming back now and he won't be back at all? Yep. It's a little bit of a gut punch before you even play a game in the playoffs.
Yeah. And obviously they didn't have him for the regular season too, so they did get used to playing without him, but they thought he was... Well, right, and they thought he was heading towards coming back, and then about a week and a half, 2 weeks before the playoffs start, they get the news that he's not. And that's got to suck a little bit of air out of the room. And then your armor is just a little bit thinner and just a little bit easier to punch through. And that's kind of what Seattle ended up doing. They kind of just ground them out over a long series. And
sure,
they can do that to anybody. It might take them 28 games, but they might do the thing.
The thing that's really interesting is, way back in October, I went out to California for a little bit of a stretch of time, and I went to the Anaheim Ducks season opener, which was against Seattle. And for whatever reason, they didn't end up winning the game. They lost the game in overtime that night to the team that just finished with, I believe, that has the best odds, right? Anaheim's got the best odds coming up in the draft lottery. And Seattle just won a playoff series against the defending Stanley Cup champions. And yet, as I'm watching that game that night, I'm looking at Seattle. I'm going, man, they're just piling on shot after shot. They're up to 40 some odd shots, and there's 5 minutes left in the third period. They're just piling it on. It's a great goaltending performance at the other end that's even making this a game right now. That's something here. And all of the new guys were scoring goals. It was Bjorkstrand. It was like that particular night. So I kind of already got a sense from day one. This is a little different. This team's a little different. And I'm so impressed by the way that they played in this series. It was one of my favorites to watch. I thought that, first of all, as soon as it started, you could tell Seattle wasn't backing down from the challenge. They had the chops to win more than just a game or two in it. Credit to Dave Hackstall. Sometimes we've talked about this before in other situations. Sometimes the first job isn't the right one or doesn't go as planned, and the experience can go a long way in the future. That's what we're seeing there with, from Philly to where he is now also, that sometimes you just got to go through it and take the experience and run with it later in another opportunity.
And sometimes your goalie stands on his brain because Philip Grubauer was spectacular when.
And that sure he was. He's the reason they won the series. He's the one. He's the primary reason.
Every game they won, Colorado scored 2 or fewer.
Yep. Exactly. And so here's the thing when it comes to a team like where Seattle was at. When you're a wild card team, and even more so when you're going up against a team that expectations are they're going to win, like the defending Stanley Cup champions, the belief is from within, at least probably from within the room, or at least when you're watching things, the belief that you, like we all feel watching it, is your ability to win the series only goes as far as each game. You win the first one, whether it's game 1 or game 2, whatever it is. It could even be game 3 when you're down 2-1. And the first thought you have is, all right, now do it again. And if you do it again, usually now we're in game 3 or game 4, and you even it up at 2 or, whatever it may be, then you sit there and you go, all right, now you're in it. You've got a shot. Can you get to the next one? Can you get to the cusp of winning the series? And then you win the third one, either 5 or 6, and you really start to say that anything's possible. And I think that belief just kept growing. As soon as they won game 4 in overtime to tie the series back up, I knew that they had a shot.
Yep.
Way more than just this is going to be go back to Colorado and it's going to end the way that all of the other series do.
Right. This isn't just some valuable playoff experience for a new team. This is a real squad that's ready to win.
And we've already said it. Colorado was easily the more talented team on paper. They always were going to be. When you have McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, the stars that they have. But here's the reality of it. When you can get 15 different players to score a goal, and you score first in every game in the series, and you get the goaltending that Grubauer gave them, and you get the buy-in from the entire room, it can amount to something really special. And this was really cool to see Seattle in year 2 do this, not because it's unusual. Seattle could have been built exactly like Vegas was and became an instant success, even like as early as last year when it was their first year, right? But it's what they did last year to this year that makes it even more impressive. That it's last year they were nothing like this. They were nothing more than a lowly expansion team that was still finding their way. And well, what else can you say? But they have found their way. And I know one of the things I was most excited about in this series was game 3. Couldn't wait to see what a crowd in Seattle was. And as soon as I watched them score the first goal of that game, I immediately went, oh yeah, this works. This crowd's, this works.
And you know what? I'll say something underrated here. The wide shot after they score, best in the league.
It's great. I think
the dual scoreboard gives them the best post-goal crowd pan in the league. 100%.
Yeah, it was excellent. I mean, the whole thing was excellent, and we'll talk more about them when we get into the second round portion of things. But
yeah, let's actually get into the next team that will play playoff games in Seattle. It won't be,
so you want to go through this one?
It won't be right at first, because Dallas does have home ice here in this series. But the Dallas Stars defeat the Minnesota Wild in 6 games. This was a really fun series.
Yeah.
It started game 1 with double overtime. Philip Gustafsson was an absolutely spectacular spectacular. I think 51 saves, something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing about like game one really set the tone for the type of series that we thought we were getting. And,
Yep.
you know, maybe game two was a mistake, you know, on Minnesota's part that they shouldn't have changed the goaltending out. That kind of cost them in game two. They go back to it in game three. It works. So now you have your answer at that point. You know, Gustafsson was great for 2 games.
Gustafsson was getting the
Fleury
net for the
was
rest of the
not for the
series.
one, and it wasn't all Fleury's fault. I'm not trying to say
No.
that, but you had your answer.
He didn't play great though.
No, he didn't, and that's the whole. But the whole point was exactly that. You had your answer.
Yep.
Play Gustafsson for the rest of the series, and they did. Here's what I'll say about the overall kind of scope of this series, which is just, you know, I love the way that the Dallas core is built and the way they've built this whole thing. You get Miro Heiskanen, Jake Ottinger, and Jason Robertson all in the same draft.
Yep.
You still have Tyler Seguin and Jamie. Tyler Seguin turning back the clock with 4 goals in a series. Like, hello.
And that's after Jamie Benn did it all season with, I think he ended up with 70 points.
And Jamie Benn had a big goal in this series as well. I mean, you know, in one of the games that they dominated. Let's go to your favorite guy on the planet, Rope Hintz, who is emerging more and more into a star.
Is he still leading the playoffs in scoring?
Yes,
he was
he is.
For a while.
12 points. Nobody else had 12.
Oh, he sure is.
12 points. A hat trick in game 2. Like, just outstanding. You know?
Yeah, he has been absolutely stellar. That power play unit is clicking.
And doesn't it feel like every player we talked about when we previewed this, you know, how much how much we like, you know, how much we like what Wyatt Johnston does, right? And he gets a goal by the end of the series. And, you know, they're just, you know, and oh, by the way, once game 3 was over and they were down 2-1 in the series, Jake Ottinger just flat out locked it up and said, I'm not letting in anything for the rest of the series practically.
No.
I mean, he gave up 3 goals for the rest of the series after that.
This next, we'll get into the second round preview in a minute here, but this second round matchup is a matchup of great goaltending and just 2 teams that believe in what they're doing. And it's going to be incredibly fun to watch.
Oh, yeah.
But Dallas, I don't know what to say about Dallas. They're just so impressive. You know, you go down 2-1, you come back and you win a gritty game 4.
Yep.
And that was the end of the series. They broke Minnesota in that game 4. Even though the series was tied.
Yeah.
Minnesota just...
Well, especially when you're going home. Yeah,
right.
Especially when you're going home, and then, you know, you could kind of see it, and like the thing that I like about the way they're built is what we talked about all along, and it's kind of combining the 2 groups that I talked about. You get that draft year in 2017 where you get 3 cornerstone players at each position, by the way, and yet you haven't moved on from the guys that were always part of it yet, and you haven't had to.
Yeah, we've been singing Dallas's praises on this show for a very long time. They have very, very, very successfully transitioned from the Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Ben Bishop era to the, you know, through the Anton Hudobin era, now into the Jake Ottinger, Jason Robertson, Rope Hintz, Miro Heiskanen, like all these young guys, without ever missing a beat. I mean, they had, I think they missed the playoffs once, but other than that, the Dallas Stars have been one of those teams that's in the conversation every year.
No, and by the way, we went this whole stretch of time without talking about somebody else who wasn't in the series for good. Like, we didn't talk about him for good reason. Joe Pavelski goes out in game 1.
Yep.
And, you know, one of their key contributors throughout the year, and
they
don't miss a beat,
and expected to be one of their big playoff guys.
Sure. And the only, like, the good news from here is that the anticipation is he will be back at some point soon, potentially here.
Interesting.
So, I mean, there was talk that he was at least making the trip to, you know, Minnesota when they went back for game 6. He didn't play, but, you know, that's the real, you know, possibility here is that if they get a player like that back, you know,
they're a scary team. So, do we want to do the second round matchup kind of now after we've talked about both first round matchups, or do we want to save them all for the end? Okay.
hold it off to the end. So you want to go to the number 1 seed in the West?
Yeah, let's transition here. Probably the most lopsided first round matchup here.
It's the only series that didn't go 6.
Yeah, the Vegas Golden Knights kind of just steamroll the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg, they really did try. They came out and they won game 1, and then Vegas, we got the old gentleman sweep here. Winnipeg takes the first one. Vegas takes the next 4 straight. The better team won.
Oh, for sure. And you almost forget that Winnipeg won game 1 because,
Vegas certainly did.
Yeah, I mean, well,
you hear about burn the tape. Vegas did a phenomenal job of just
not completely, and I'll tell you why.
Okay,
because it was an interesting start to the series that Winnipeg gets the game 1 win the way they did too, pretty dominantly actually. But Vegas responds in game 2, and then Winnipeg has that crazy rally in game 3 and gets it tied somehow. I mean, they were down 4-1 in that game, and they get it back to 4-4 in the final minute, and losing in double overtime really felt like a major blow for Winnipeg. It felt like they were never the same after that. And, look, we all kind of saw, I'm sure a lot of people out there who listen also saw what was said after the game. And
that team
they've not only did they break, but they're in for some major changes to come too.
Blake Wheeler's got to be gone.
I fully imagine so. And then
Scheifele's probably gone.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think this core is getting blown up.
It has to. Okay. Flip a coin on Nick Ehlers. You probably keep Kyle Connor. Flip a coin on Josh Morrissey, and everyone else is gone.
Including
Hellebuck's definitely gone.
Yeah, you got to move him because he's going to be one of the easiest pieces to move. He's got one year left on his contract.
Connor Hellebuck, Buffalo Sabre.
Ooh, Buffalo needs a goalie too. Well, not needs one, but like if they had a veteran,
1 year stopgap.
Especially since Craig Anderson's hanging him up, and you got 2 younger guys over there right now. That's not a horrible idea.
It's it's either there or Pittsburgh.
But either way, as for Vegas, to shift gears to Vegas aside, they seem like they were just getting it all. Like, the goaltending from Laurent Brossoit was great. Jack Eichel and Chandler Stevens
scored his first playoff goal in this series. So congratulations to Jack Eichel for finally making the playoffs and actually, contributing.
Sure. And it's great for him to see him kind of get that taste of it and start to kind of make the impact that people figured he would. And then, the real big part of it, because I don't want to gloss over and mention Chandler Stevenson there, by the way, because that's a really, that's obviously he was great in the series as well. But you get Mark Stone back, and it's an immediate impact. And look, Vegas is still a battered team because they had guys in and out and all over the place during the course of this series. I mean, there were defensemen who were in and out toward the end because, it's this guy's banged up, he can't go tonight, all that. And look, maybe you don't do that if it's not a 3-1 series. I get it. But and look, the extra time that they just had is going to be really good for them. Because they're the only team in the playoffs. Like I said, they're the only team that didn't even need a game 6, let alone a game 7. But
yeah, they took care of business.
I got a question for you when it comes to Mark Stone. Anyway, is there anybody in the league more fun to watch when he scores a goal than that guy? I mean, the dude's got the best stellies in the league.
It's pretty good. This series was a lot of fun to watch, but again, at a certain point, I believe we watched the implosion, the final run of this iteration of the Winnipeg Jets.
Sure, and look, I think that Vegas, being the team that didn't make the playoffs last year, was determined to make it this year. Didn't just make it, but obviously they were the best team in the Western Conference. They wanted to send a message. And boy, did they ever in this series then. Now listen, the next one's not going to, and we're saving the predictions, but the next one's not going to be that easy.
No, and
you're not getting a team rolling over and whatever in this one, but let's talk about that.
Well, let's talk about who did make it through, because if you're following along at home, this is the Edmonton LA matchup, and we talked about this quite a bit on the last show because we had Phil Deneau versus Connor McDavid, Anze Kopitar versus Leon Draisaitl, and the series kind of played out like that. Like there weren't a whole lot of blowouts. This was a pretty tight, pretty contentious series. The LA Kings did a spectacular job. Spectacular, impeccable job of neutralizing Connor McDavid and, for the most part, Leon Draisaitl as well. He did have some success, of course. Unfortunately for LA fans, the Edmonton general manager has finally decided to put a team around Connor McDavid, and they got enough depth scoring that they made it through the first round. They beat the LA Kings in 6.
They got enough around them at this point in time, but it wasn't always in this series exactly like that either.
It's fair.
You know, like it can't come and go. It can't just disappear. It's still the McDavid Draisaitl show for the most part. I mean, because those two are just incredible in what their abilities are and what they can do, and all of that. And like, you don't see anybody else playing like this. You just don't. But you just said it. What really will help this team in the playoffs is when you do get everyone involved. You got, Klim Kostin scoring goals. Kyler Yamamoto gets his first goal of the series, and it's the game winner of the series. Yep. Zach Hyman in overtime with a goal at one point. Evander Kane picked up his scoring down the stretch of the series.
Ryan McLeod contributing.
I got to tell you one player.
I
got to tell you one player who I'm really impressed with on their team that I might have mentioned on the last one, but even if I did, I don't mind repeating it. Evan Bouchard looked great in this series.
He's really coming into his own as a top-tier NHL defenseman.
That was incredible, and he's had a great series in his own right, especially on that power play when you've got the setup that they do with both of them, with McDavid and Draisaitl both being equally pass and shot threat. And then all of a sudden somebody's just dropping it off to him and saying, let go of the one-timer.
Yeah, this team is doing a really good job, and the Klim Kostin pickup was a really great little pickup.
Yeah. Now before we just keep going on the Edmonton love fest here with this one, and then the McDavid Draisaitl show and all that, I give LA a lot of credit. I had the series going 6. This was one of the ones I actually nailed to the game length and everything. I had it going 6 because I expected a fight. And a lot of it was the play of Jonas Korpisalo. Like, he was great. And Adrian Kempe was outstanding in this series. And, every time just when you thought the team was dead, they crawled their way back into it. That all really played out the way that, it kind of played out the way I expected it to, but it was a hard-fought series, and I appreciate that it was a hard-fought series. Exactly,
physical series.
And let's not forget, these two teams met in the first round last year too, and same end result with Edmonton moving on.
I think this might have been the nastiest series in the first round. Dallas, Minnesota gave it a run, but man, Edmonton, LA was nasty.
It had some major heat. Yeah, it had some major heat. But what a fun series it was. And, look, I'm not surprised that Edmonton moved on, but I like the fight that was in there. And I think I think a series like that sets the tone for what's coming, for who they have to play next. I mean, it really does.
Yeah. And again, we've talked about it. They will face Vegas in the second round. We'll get into those matchups a little bit later on. But I am so excited. I am so excited for the Western Conference kind of as a whole. Before we head over to the East here, just kind of a little bit of an overview. We have Seattle, Dallas, and Vegas, Edmonton. And those are just going to be... It's going to be incredible hockey every night. And we're at the point now. A lot of people love the first round, and I do too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But the first round almost has a little bit too much hockey. And I say that just so sarcastically, because there's no such thing as too much hockey. But
it's a workout on,
As we get into the second round, you really get to savor every single minute. Like, you might have to double screen a little bit if something goes to overtime, but you really get to really savor every minute of every game from here on out.
Yeah.
And we have some really, really, really good matchups lined up. So. Do we want to switch over to the Eastern Conference
yeah,
here
we
and kind
will
of hit our
because
matchups?
yeah, let me just touch on what you just said about like the
Yeah.
amount of hockey and all that stuff like that, because you're right. I mean, there comes a point, and here's the thing too, the first round, it's not just there's a lot because it's a lot going on at one time, right?
There's games
But
literally overlapping all night, every night.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit. So not only is it a workout like within each individual night, but what happened when we were predicting these series also, and then what happened as it played out? Every series except for Vegas went 6 or longer.
Yep.
And when you get that many game 6s and then game 7s to go with it, because once you're looking at 7 of them going game 6, you're getting at least 3, probably at least 3 or 4 that go game 7.
Yeah.
And that's what we had. We had 3 total, but nonetheless, right? And we're gonna believe me, because we're gonna get into the part where
some of the more surprising game 7s here.
Well, not about game 7s. We're gonna get into the part where some of these game 6s were one bounce away from the other result, and having a game 7. I mean, you had overtime in game 6 a couple of times.
Yeah.
Where it can go the other direction really easily.
And a couple of them were doing that. A couple of them were one bounce away. Like it. Whew.
Oh, a couple of them were bounces. All right, we'll get into that. I think we've got to start.
We have to start with the big story.
We have to start with the biggest one.
The best team in regular season history, not just losing in the first round, choking on a 3-1 series lead. The tears after Game 7 seem to indicate that was Patrice Bergeron's last game. If that is the case, it's a heartbreaking way for such a well-respected legend, first ballot Hall of Famer, to go out. But Kevin, talk to me about how we got here. I said, we have the best team in regular season history. They're up 3-1, heading back to Boston to a rowdy TD Garden for Game 5, ready to close out the Panthers. And Sergei Bobrovsky comes into the net.
Yeah, no kidding. So here's the thing with this, because it's no secret on the show that this is probably the second most talked about team that we talk about on the show. I honestly have talked about the Boston Bruins so many times that I feel like I've almost kind of become a bit of like an expert on them as well, to an extent. So I have more notes on this series than any other series, and I tweeted more about it after it was over than any other series. So through 4 games, wasn't this exactly what we expected? Yeah. Wasn't it exactly what we thought it was going to be? I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure there were people calling for a sweep. I get it, but Boston being up 3-1 after 4 was pretty much right on par. And that's the way I had it. I even last show I even said it's going. I had Boston in 5, and I said don't be surprised if Florida wins an early game.
Florida steals a game somewhere, right?
Well, not even just steals it. I said watch it be early.
Yeah,
and it was game 2. So sure enough, you had like that game 2. And what happens when they win a game, like especially early in the series, you start going, oh, maybe they'll find a way to do something. And then
taking game 2 in Boston, I think, is the thing that matters. If it was game 3 back at home with the crowd, blah blah blah, I think you read a little bit less into it.
Right.
But the fact that they snagged a game in Boston in that first pair, I think that really gave them some legs in the series.
And then when Boston goes on the road and wins the next 2. Then you start to
cut the legs out from under them.
Then you sit there and you go, well, now it really is going the way I thought it was going to go. Like, not just in the sense that or now at least it really feels like it's probably over, right? And for me, after game 4, they're up 3-1 in the series, and this is where everything changes, because I look at game 5 and I see just punch counter punch from both teams in terms of goals, but one key difference. Boston outshot Florida 43-22 in regulation. So when this thing goes to overtime, it feels like it's just a matter of time.
Yep.
And it really was, because guess who dominated the start of that overtime? It was Boston. They were looking like they were getting ready to clinch this thing, seal it off. That's the way it is. And then Linus Ullmark misplays the puck behind the net.
Man.
That is the series-changing play right there. Once Florida survived that Game 5 and won to extend the series to a Game 6, really even before then in Game 5, just getting it to overtime does this. They were playing with house money.
A Boston goalie hasn't fallen from grace that quickly since Tuukka Rask in the 2013 Cup Final.
Ooh.
Got a good one in there.
But so anyway, no. So Florida was playing with house money at that point throughout Game 5 because, and I tweeted something like this after the series was over, getting records in the regular season is all well and good and it's exciting, but it creates pressure in the playoffs. It doesn't mean that Boston, I'm not saying that to say that Boston was ill-equipped to handle the pressure of being in that spot in the playoffs. What it does mean is that after a while, though, you do have one team that goes completely carefree. They're just happy to be here at this point.
And Matthew Tkachuk said as much after Game 6. He said, "We're just having fun."
There are no expectations.
Yep.
Nobody predicts that you're going to win the series. Nobody, let alone that you're not going to win the series. You're not going to win the cup. You have no expectations. You're literally happy to be there. And and as you saw, when the losses start to pile up for Boston in Game 5, then Game 6, you're into Game 7. Florida's got nothing to lose at that point. They've already pushed this thing farther than anybody ever anticipated they would. If nothing else, what was more impressive to me was after a frenetic third period, the Bruins tie it up. They have to come back to tie it up. They take the lead in Game 7. Following the wild third period that was Game 6, and you got to 5 minutes left, and I'm going to sit here and tell you, I swear to you on my life, I was over watching the game at my in-laws. My wife is sitting in the same room as I am while the game is on, and they get the TV timeout with 4:58 left, and I turn around and I said, I just got a funny feeling we're not done. Okay. This thing's not over yet. There's not more than 5 minutes left, and I'm just sitting here, and sure enough, the net's empty at the end of the game. And here's the next part for me. This is how I know I'm watching way too damn much of stuff. Because the net's empty, they're trying to push for the tying goal, and I turn around, and again, I sit there and I'm not commentating, but like I'm talking, and my wife's there to hear it, so it's not like I'm talking to the wall.
Right.
But I sit there and I even said, because I think they tried a play that kind of worked. It worked it down low a little bit or something like that. And I turn around and I go, that's what you want to do. Get the puck high and funnel it to the net. And 10 seconds later, Brandon Montour had it and scored. And I turn around and I whipped her around. And I said, see, what was I saying? I had one of those moments. And, then
real,
you get to...
Real quick. It's funny that you mentioned that 4:58 TV timeout because I said something during the same TV timeout to my wife.
Okay.
And it ended up being about as prophetic as yours was.
Okay, what'd you say?
I said if they lose this game like this, Bergeron retires.
Well, yeah.
And I think given the results, it looked like he probably was going to be done regardless. But
we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how prophetic it is, but we're not there yet. No, it looks prophetic. I'm saying it looks prophetic.
Was sobbing.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Sobbing.
We will get to that. But then the finish, right? Because Boston, the Bruins, the fans in the building were shell shocked after
Stunned.
that. I mean,
Carter Verhaeghe is the overtime hero.
They didn't know what even hit them. And Florida had 3 or 4 just brilliant looks before Carter Verhaeghe gets the winner. Verhaeghe had one of them to begin with. He had a great look at the front of the net. That came after, of all people. And it was funny because, again, almost prophetic. I tweeted right before the overtime started. It would be pretty poetic. You're looking for an OT hero at that point, right? You're and I'm not doing it in the Butcher Grass OT challenge style. I'm not doing that completely. But I turned around, I even said it would be pretty poetic if Patrice Bergeron got another Game 7 OT winner in this spot. Given the especially for where it's at, right? This thing's been pushed to the limit at this point. Boston's kind of on their heels. It's they just got stunned by the fact that it's tied with a minute to go. wouldn't it be something if he scored another Game 7 OT winner? That would be pretty cool, right? And then I sat there, and the next thing that I said when it came, I said, as for Florida, we've played 60 minutes, and Matthew Tkachuk doesn't have a shot on goal yet.
Yep.
And who got the breakaway not 2 minutes in?
I thought he ended it.
And I
really
thought he was
did.
going
Yep.
in to score.
Also worth noting in this game, we mentioned Linus Ullmark making a pretty critical error in overtime of Game 5. Mm-hmm. He did also start Game 6 and did not look particularly great, which led to Jeremy Swayman getting the start in Game 7.
So it's funny because this is the next note I have down about this series. Because the one thing I'll say from the Boston side on this, well, let's start with this. So
Swayman's got to start 6 in hindsight, right?
No, it's not that I don't start Ullmark there. I have a different theory for this. I think that the way that they handled Ullmark in the series, it really bothered me. When you're starting to get to the point where Game 2 is getting out of hand, you got to get him out of there.
Okay.
I have no problem with him starting consistently throughout. I have no problem with you going back to him in Game 3 after you lose Game 2. And because then in Game 3 and Game 4, you look like a genius. He wins both games and looks fine. Right? So you look like a genius for going back to him, but I would have gotten him out of there when Game 2 looks like it's obvious Game 2 is not going your way. Get him out.
I'm surprised we didn't see Swayman in Game 3. Not because they don't trust Ullmark, not because blah, 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 just because that's what they did all season. Like, I know Linus Ullmark's probably going to win the Vezina, might get some serious Hart voting, etc. But it really was a tandem. This was the first time, I believe it was the first time all season that Ullmark started 6 games in a row.
Well, yes, it definitely is. And here's the second
You don't want
part.
that to be in the playoffs.
Sure. Well, and here's the second part for me, because again, he makes the mistake in Game 5 in overtime. I got no problem coming back to him in Game 6. Here's where I do have a problem. The third period of Game 6 is chaos. Total mass chaos.
Insanity.
I think that either when they tied the game back up at 4 or when they get the 5th one to tie it back up, one of those two, you got to get him out of there. Because he looks, every time they scored a goal, he looks like he's getting up as if he's in pain.
Yep.
So he looks spent. Get him out of there.
He certainly doesn't look 100%. Not anywhere close to it.
And honestly, I'm not even sitting here. I'm not trying to sit here and say, make the change to go, oh, it's 4-4. Make the change because he's playing bad. No, make the change because your team needs to wake up here. You're screwing around with Game 6. You could win this thing.
Yep.
And you're screwing around with it. And rather than let him just eat the end instead of letting him eat the end result of Game 6 and be in there for all 60, roughly. I mean, a little bit that he was out for the empty net, but you get the point. Just to then turn to the other goalie in Game 7, a guy who had only seen one shot on goal in the entire series. And why? Because he had to come in because Ullmark got kicked out of a game for trying to fight somebody.
For trying to fight Matthew Tkachuk after he was very clearly rattled because he was playing poorly.
Sure.
It should have been a bigger indicator to you that he was trying to fight Matthew Tkachuk than anything.
Sure. And listen, I'm having a big discussion here about the goaltending thing of this. Yeah. I'm going to tell you the real reason that they lost this series. Because it happened in Game 2 also when they lost, but really for the final 3, and Ullmark's giveaway is just a part of this, their puck management was horrible. As bad as I have seen it all year. The team that looked like a well-oiled machine all year long, all of a sudden couldn't string together passes. They were struggling. And all you need to know is go look at Matthew Tkachuk's first goal in Game 6. Look at that turnover.
Yep.
They didn't do that all year, and now all of a sudden in the playoffs, that's what's creeping up on you. Now I do have a question for you out of all of this. And by the way, this I had so that the goaltending thing was one of my things, but my second thing on the Boston side of this whole thing was this.
Is it Bergeron?
It is about Bergeron because
I wanted to talk about that too.
Sure, because Boston has been a city with an embarrassment of riches in the sports world for over 2 decades. I'm not at all trying to and I'm not trying to dump on them here by saying that.
And just in full F Boston, absolutely.
Especially
the Celtics.
And here's the thing. From where we are from, you get tired of watching the repeat act, right? But here's I understand it.
By the way, Sixers in 4. Anyway.
The Sixers kept the vibes going in TD Garden
That's what I'm
tonight,
saying.
by the way. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Anyway, but I understand why it happens when you get cornerstone players and you build teams the right way and you play consistently and you always seem to have someone who's among the best of the best on your roster at all times. And I'm not talking just the Bruins here. I'm talking about every team in the city for as long as we feel like we can remember for the last 20 years has always had cornerstone players, been built the right way, had one of the best guys in the sport all the time, right?
Yep.
Which is why watching Patrice Bergeron after the game and the emotion that he had, you know that this could be it.
It looks like it probably is,
right.
frankly.
And Patrice Bergeron, and I've said this before, Patrice Bergeron's a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer, won a cup in 2011, made 2 more appearances in the final, all the Selke wins. There's nothing more
Gold medalist.
There's nothing more he could accomplish that wouldn't be a repeat act, right? And yet, for as special as 2011 and 2013 and 2019 certainly were, this might have been the most special season he's ever gone through.
Maybe.
What they accomplished leading up to this point.
Well, and I did also...
And from that, there's this voice in your mind that's just saying, this isn't how it ends, is it? Like, it can't be how it ends.
And something worth mentioning on the Bergeron front here is, so he did not play in the first 5 games of this series. And the reason he did not is because he suffered an injury in the last game of the regular season against Montreal. Now, why was he playing in that game, you might ask? And I think part of the reason...
This is important.
Right. And I think part of the reason is probably because he knew that this might be his last run and he wanted to play near home again.
At home.
I think that was part of it. But also his dad is sick.
Yep.
And he wanted to play in front of his father. He doesn't know if his father will be around to see him play again.
Mm-hmm.
So it was important to Patrice Bergeron to play in Game 82 after the win record was already locked up in a game that didn't mean anything. And that really goes a long way to show you about the kind of player and the kind of person that Patrice Bergeron is.
Yeah.
Because he could have very easily, when we look back at Patrice Bergeron's career in 20 years with some hindsight here, everyone's going to remember the punctured lung in the Stanley Cup final. That's the big flashy story.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the most Patrice Bergeron story that could ever happen. And the team looked okay without him. We talked about the fact that they did win 3 of those first 4 games, without Patrice Bergeron. And he wasn't the reason that they lost. Like, when he came back, he was not a detriment to the lineup. He was not, the reason that they lost. But he was definitely not 100%. And it would be interesting to know, if he was in Game 5, do they win that game? I think that's the big what if for Boston fans surrounding the Patrice Bergeron injury situation. But that being said, I don't think he would change it. I don't think he would go back and unplay that game in Montreal.
Nah, he wouldn't change anything. No. He's probably one of the biggest no regrets guys out there to begin with. The emotion was because the emotion was there the whole time that they're leaving the ice. But it really hit when it's Marchand, because that's the guy who you've gone to battle with forever.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure Krejci was right there too, kind of in a similar vein. As far as the emotion between the two.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I know. And the thing about Bergeron is, there's plenty, and I'm not getting into a big rant about this, but there's plenty that's wrong with hockey culture. We've seen it over the years. This is one of the good guys. This is just a guy who goes out and plays and just loves to play.
I don't think anyone has ever said a bad word about Patrice Bergeron
how
as a
can
person
you? The guy
or
just is a good friggin' hockey player.
Yep.
He's just a really good friggin' hockey player.
And he's a point-of-goal game. He's a point-of-goal guy who they're going to name the defensive trophy after he retires. How do you,
practically. They should.
Every coach in the entire league, or every coach coaching any kid 10 or younger, is trying to make 20 Patrice Bergerons. He's the perfect hockey player.
Well, because he's a model centerman. He carries himself incredibly well. And while we're at it, the guy's never gonna the guy can live in Boston for the rest of his life, be around the Boston Bruins forever. If he does hang them up playing wise, he can hang around the Bruins forever and never buy a drink in the city ever again because he was that.
And the second he does decide to hang him up, 37 going into the rafters, 100%.
I mean,
I'm convinced they're waiting for him to retire so they can start putting teams from that 11 cup in. Him and Marchand are the only ones left. Like, the Bruins aren't retiring Tyler Seguin's number, so.
I mean, did they do Char's number already?
I'm not sure.
I don't think, because I think that retirement's too fresh, but Char's number's getting retired.
Oh, absolutely. But I think they're waiting for Bergeron. That's what I mean. But all right.
Yeah, but I think it would, I just don't know if you're gonna.
That's fair.
I don't know if you're gonna do that right away, completely or whatever.
Right. Oh man, this game's getting wild. Sorry, we're
no, I know.
During
I'm
this
looking,
Rangers Devils game, and hey, look, it's Jacob Trouba.
No. I'm looking to see if I don't know. Okay, it's not who I thought it was initially.
Okay, it's not Jack Hughes.
It's Timo Meier instead. Okay. But Timo Meier just looked like Eric Lindros.
And I'm pretty sure Trouba's going to look like Scott.
Oh my God! It's almost identical.
Is it really?
Yes,
okay,
I'm
seeing the replay now. Give me a second.
Tell me that's not almost identical.
Man, that's the same hit.
It's the same cross center ice almost into the offensive zone. Yeah.
He put his head down for half a second. Wow.
Look at this. And there's no, I mean, what else are you supposed to do?
Devils fans are used to seeing this hit in this building. In this building too.
Yeah, really.
Man. Oh.
God. No, it wasn't. No. That was in the center. That was in Philly.
Well, I just mean it's the building. It's Scott Stevens' building.
It was Scott Stevens' building, yes.
So we are still working our way towards this matchup. We got some time left in this game. But meanwhile, is there anything else you wanted to say on Florida, Boston, or do we want to start talking about who they're going to go up against?
We can probably start moving on. I'm sorry, I'm tweeting something about that.
Yeah. So the big story here is the Boston Bruins blowing the President's Trophy in the best regular season in history and going down in the first round. But quite frankly, I think the second biggest story is that the streak is broken. For the first time since 2004, the Toronto Maple Leafs win a round. They defeat the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games, in overtime of Game 6, in a series that... So it started out as a really good series.
Okay, it started out as a really good series.
And I know Tampa won Game 5, but Games 4, 5, and 6, it felt like they were running out of gas. To me, Game 4 was the last competitive game of that series. And Toronto winning that game, it just seemed pretty inevitable. Like, yes, I know we make the jokes about Toronto blowing it and blah, blah, blah. And if they had lost Game 6, it certainly wouldn't have been as inevitable as I'm making it sound now. But they were just the better team. Tampa looks so tired. They've played so much hockey over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I think it finally just caught up to them. And John Cooper just has finally run out of horse to beat. Like, he's gotten all he can out of this group for now.
It's the horse that's out of gas on the home stretch there.
You just can't whip it anymore.
I don't disagree with you that it looked like they ran out of gas. I don't think it was non-competitive down the stretch.
No, I agree.
As you're saying, I think. I mean, let's put it this way: that this is exactly where we're starting this whole thing with you're one bounce away in Game 6 from Game 7.
And for the record, I don't mean to imply that Tampa gave up.
You didn't imply it. It's just it
just seemed like they were a step behind. They were a step slow. They were giving their all. They just didn't quite have it. They just came up a little bit short.
The thing is that it was just a weird series. I mean, I guess first of all, initial reaction. Finally, it's over. The first round drought here misses. The longest running joke in hockey is all over.
The fan reactions were some good ones.
Now we talked last show because I had said I was starting to do some stuff on Instagram and whatever, all that type of stuff. I put a little video clip after this game in particular, or after the series was over, the Toronto series, because who scored the game-winning goal in Game 6?
John Tavares.
And it had been 19 years since they had made it out of the first round, and he scored in overtime to win a game 2-1 in Game 6, just like he did 7 years ago to win Game 6 2-1 in overtime for the New York Islanders, who hadn't won a playoff series in 23 years.
Yep.
Funny how history repeats itself.
Well, there's one more drought that Leafs fans are hoping John Tavares gets a chance to break.
Oh, for sure. So this is really for the core group of this team. Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Morgan Riley, who had a brilliant series offensively, just seemed like every time he touched the puck, he did something, to change the outcome. William Nylander, Tavares, these are the ones that have been around for you. I mean, Tavares is actually probably still the newcomer of that whole group in a way, but still been around for long enough, right? The reactions you saw from Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas, that's the weight that this carried.
Kyle Dubas reacted like a man who saved his job.
Right.
Who gets to stay in Toronto.
Not
his
just
contract's up, but
that's exactly what I have written down. Not just for the city of Toronto, the Leafs franchise, and the players on the team, but for themselves. Their jobs were on the line here.
And Kyle Dubas' contract is coming up. Not only is he re-signing, he's now getting paid. And the further they go, the more he's going to get paid. So what was better? Jason Spezza slamming the table after the overtime win in Game 5. Kyle Dubas chirping Tampa fans in Game 4. Or Kyle Dubas turning bright purple after they won in Game 6 because he just screamed for about 2.5 minutes straight. Because we got some really good clips out of that box over the course of this series.
I'm not even going to go to that box for my favorite reaction. My favorite reaction was the airtime that Sheldon Keefe got off the bench. Just, same thing, knowing he just saved his job.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Did you see the Dangle reaction?
Of course I did.
Just pure screaming.
Here's the thing. I didn't even. So I went back to watch LFR for a second because I wanted to see his LFR.
It was a great LFR.
Because as we've done, come on, that's part of the longest running joke in hockey was when it was over, you went to go find that reaction.
Oh, absolutely.
But eventually, I also caught the in-game, the watch a Leaf game with Dangle, whole thing. And got that reaction as well. The in the moment, just pure reaction of, oh my goodness, it went in.
That man was trying really, really hard not to cry on a national stream.
Yep. You're right.
And he was definitely crying. He was just trying really hard not to visibly cry.
Right. Now, and that's the thing, right? But that's the whole thing about the series, right? This was probably the most compelling series of the first round. Not for the storyline of Toronto possibly winning it, but for how close it was. You have games 1 and 2 that aren't close at all, but each team gets one, so it keeps the series close, and it's a battle through 2 games. Then you get Game 3, and this is how close this series was. You get Game 3, Tampa's up a goal with 2 minutes left, and Toronto ties it with 1 minute to go, wins in overtime. Game 4, Tampa's up 4-1. It's halfway through the third period. And they lose that lead too. And Toronto wins again in overtime.
That's the game.
Toronto could have won Game 6. It was close to being the same situation of rally back to force overtime. So it was really close to that. Or Game 5, sorry. That's what I'm saying. They could have won Game 5. Yeah. And then you get the 2-1 fight to the finish in Game 6, that takes that goal, just a turnaround shot off of skate, into the net. It's not going to be the prettiest goal on the highlight reel, but they all count the same. And just, but just a brilliant series between these two. I mean,
you know why Game 4 was the game?
What's that?
It was 4-1. It was 4-1 in the third period, and Tampa broke. They took their foot off the pedal, and the Leafs finally started having some success. They started flipping that little wrist shot on from the point that we saw. We heard Derek Lalonde talking about, and they made the Tampa Bay Lightning and to an extent Andrei Vasilevsky look human.
Well, and this goes back to my point about the core, though, too. When you need it the most, that who took over in the spot when before it's even a game again?
The 2 goals in Game 6, Austin Matthews, John Tavares.
And that's not even where I'm going with that, because I'm going game 4.
Okay.
They're down 4-1. You need a goal, Austin Matthews. You get a power play right after it. You need another goal. This is a must score situation for you, or this is a tied series.
Guess what?
Right?
It's Austin Matthews again.
It's Austin Matthews again. And then Morgan Rielly, like I said, every time he touched it, it felt like big goal. And then here comes the crazy part. It's all the core guys. It's Matthews. It's Rielly. Marner is setting up plays. Tavares is involved in this. This is what they forget. This isn't even part of the regular core per se, but who tied up Game 3? This is what you went out and got Ryan O'Reilly for, right?
Yep.
That's the whole reason you went out and got him, was to get somebody who could come up in those moments.
He was great.
And who scored the game winner in Game 4, though? Deflection by Alex Kerfoot. There's the depth.
Yep.
There's the maybe not the unexpected hero.
College edition Matthew Nyes has looked great since he's come in.
Yeah, they got a winner in that one.
Oh, yeah. Full blown. He is a real guy. He's going to be in their middle 6 probably for the next couple of years, and yeah, he's an asset for sure. And they're going to move on in the second round, and they don't have to face the best regular season team in history. They face the Florida Panthers.
And you know what? And I'm not trying to make, again, we're not quite onto the preview portion of this yet, but I want to say this here because there's an element, it kind of goes both ways, because they could have had it this is demon number 1, and then the Bruins have been a part of the demons for so much of it that it could have been another whole
could have been
chapter of the story. It kind of could have been poetic that those two would have faced off against each other, but really, it doesn't matter. I mean, let's put it this way: do you think Florida's going to go?
Toronto cares?
Well, Toronto doesn't care, and Florida's going to go in thinking the same thing. That everybody's going to sit there because here's the thing: what is going to happen now? And we're not going to make the prediction part yet, but everybody's going to sit there and say, well, Toronto got over the hump of the first round for the first time. And now look, they don't even have to play Boston for it. So they're going to do it, right? Conference final time, right? And Florida's just going to sit there and go, keep not believing.
Keep saying that.
Keep calling us underdogs.
Yep. I agree. And it's going to be very interesting, and we will talk about that matchup in just a minute. We do have one more first round matchup that's concluded. Obviously, we are still recording here during the end of Devils Rangers. The Devils are,
which is why we're kind of stalling a little.
Yeah, bit. Sometimes we're watching the game, to be honest, but we are paying attention.
Well, I'm sorry, but the hit that was the Trouba on Meyer hit.
I was more talking about Shesterkin going end over end about a minute and a half before that.
Right, getting taken off his feet by Hischier getting knocked down.
Regardless of how this series ends, and the Devils are up 2-0 with a little less than 10 minutes to go.
Right.
This will carry into next season. This is nasty.
Oh yeah.
These two teams. This is one of those.
It's renewed now. This is
absolutely.
Great.
This is one of those hate is born in the playoffs kind of series.
Well, this is what's great about actually this is kind of a nice segue from the Leafs series too, because the Leafs and Lightning have already played each other in the playoffs multiple times. So coming into this one, you knew the same thing. It's kind of why John Cooper throughout the whole thing was, like I said, he's got kind of lawyer-like answers.
Oh, he was
for
playing
everything.
games in the media the entire series.
But there's an element of it where, you know what, he's sitting here going, you think I don't know anything about this team? How many years in a row have we played them in the playoffs?
Yep.
Right? You think I don't know?
Absolutely. So the one series we do have remaining here to talk about that is complete. The Carolina Hurricanes kind of just ground out the New York Islanders.
Yeah.
It did take 6.
There was some overtime involved too.
There sure was. No one's really all that surprised by that. We knew these were two pretty defensively stout teams.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of what we got. And I think the biggest surprise for a lot of people was the success of Carolina's offense. People kind of doubted their ability to score, four and up goals in a game. And they showed the ability to do that. And they showed the ability to put pucks by Sorokin. And, I mean, that's all it takes. When you rely on your defense and he gives up 4 goals in game 2, 5 goals in game 4. The rest of them were all tight, but
right,
that's enough to make the difference.
Sure, and I think one of the keys to what you're talking about is, like for a team that didn't have Andrei Svechnikov, kind of where was the offense going to come from?
Right.
Beyond the obvious. I mean, like, I'm not trying, like, Sebastian Aho is obviously a great offensive player, but I think people looked and were like, hey, you know what? You just took one of their top 3 offensive players out of the whole thing. What happened now?
Sebastian Aho is elite offensively. Andrei Svechnikov is an elite goal scorer, and there's a difference. Right? He's the guy that puts the biscuit in the basket, and without him, you're worried about who's stepping up.
Right. So I guess let me give my kind of primer on, like, I'll go with the Islander side and then I'll go to the Carolina side because we're going to talk more about Carolina as we move into the future of some of these series. Because Carolina, like we already said it, Carolina's play is rooted in defense, and the Islanders really have gone to the well with the same group a lot. They added Bo Horvat this year, but in the years that they've made playoff runs recently, it's been the same group for the most part. And it feels like this is gonna sound a little Winnipeg of them. It feels like they've come about as far as they can go with this current group. The bottom 6 is really past their prime. The defense could probably use some upgrades. They've got a lot of stuff to figure out. I mean, when you look at consider guys in the bottom 6 and realize that you're running out in their 30s. Zach Parise, Kyle Palmieri, Matt Martin, Casey Cizikas, Cal Clutterbuck. Like, something's probably got to give with that a little bit. Like you can build around Barzal, and I think Nelson's obviously a valuable piece. Like, Nelson stepped up when nobody else was even really, like, kind of not nobody was there, but wasn't really there. And Horvat's going to be there now. But again, he's like teetering on that line of like being one of the older guys. So that's a little bit of a question mark going forward.
But with that contract kicking in next year, you kind of got to make that one work.
Well, they're going to have to make it work. It's just he's teetering on that grouping, and you don't need to add any more pieces. That you need to shed some of that.
They're in a precarious position, and it'll be interesting to see how 80-year-old Lou Lamoriello decides he wants to handle that. Or if he wants to handle that. It's very interesting. We all knew that they were missing kind of the offensive talent, and you add Bo Horvat, and that's all well and good. He's a really good player, but it's just not enough. You can't rely on Matthew Barzal and Bo Horvat to score all of your goals.
Nah, exactly. And I went in and I just looked right now, so Brock Nelson had 5 points in the series. Kyle Palmieri ended up with 5 points in the series. Barzal kind of picked it up late. Like, Barzal didn't even have, I don't think he had a point until game 5, right? Like, that's when he finally scored his first couple goals. You can't have your big trade deadline acquisition, who you then commit to and sign, come away in a 6-game series with a goal and an assist.
It's a bad look.
It can't happen. And
at a certain point, it's now been 2 years, and you've replaced the coach.
Yeah,
I wonder.
I mean, look, you've got a goaltender, you've got a forward who is worth building around, and I think that you can.
You've still got young pieces. You've got Noah Dobson.
That's where I was going with it. I just don't. The thing I don't know yet with Dobson is it's not clear cut that he's that level. He might be a really nice middle pair defenseman by the end of the thing, But
he reminds me a lot of Ivan Provorov. He's got the top end talent, but is he going to be able to kind of show that full time?
The thing is that he's never playing in those top end situations, though. They kind of keep him sheltered, and that works out for him a little bit. But what happened? Like, again, I think that you can't let him, like, you can't protect him on the third pairing forever, and you can't also just keep rolling out Pellick, Pollock, Mayfield, and expect a bunch of big changes. It's not going to happen. This is as good as it gets, I think.
Yep. And a lot of this team's locked in. So.
Yeah. So let's go to the Carolina side of it then, because
and
look, I already said a little bit. Sebastian Aho is a great player. He really led the way in this series. I mean,
he emerged superior in the battle of the Sebastian Ahos.
That's true. You want to go look for a playoff hockey type of play. Take a puck off the face that goes into your own net, no less, basically, and go get stitches, come back, and then score.
Yep.
That's what happens in the playoffs, right?
Absolutely. Second bravest comeback of the playoffs. Number one being Morgan Barron. Took a skate to the face, 75 stitches. If you haven't looked it up, it's nasty. Anyway, but yes, skate to the face.
Picture of a hockey player in the playoffs.
Oh, yeah. But Aho takes a face right to the mush. Brock Nelson, by the way, beautiful hand-eye coordination, batting it into the net straight out of the air. One of the most impressive things I've ever seen a hockey player do, to be honest. But it feels really awful. There were a couple of goals off the face in this first round. Zach Hyman scored one, too.
Yeah, I know.
But either way...
You already kind of touched on it with Carolina, though, that how many guys were kind of pitching in, because they have a bunch of guys who are certainly not superstars, but find a way to chip in, and like the superstar or the not quite superstars I'm talking about, and they very well may eventually become more of a star player type, but. Like Seth Jarvis had a really good series. Martin
Jesperi Kotkaniemi has been great.
Kotkaniemi had a strong series,
been
and they'll kind of. But think about this for a second. You're also
Fast.
Well, that's where I was going. You're also hearing Stefan Nason, Jesper Fast, Paul Stastny. They lose Teuvo Teravainen during the series.
Yep.
And like I said, with Jarvis and Nakash, they're going to be really solid players for years to come. The defense was really on point pretty much across the board. I mean, I don't really recall big flaws, Burns and Jacob Slavin. And, you're watching as a third pairing of, what was it? Jesse Chatfield and Shane Gostisbehere are doing things too.
Shane Gostisbehere excelling on this team. Just,
you knew it was going to happen though.
Yeah.
It's Rod Brindamore, rooted in defense and
getting the most out of the player. Yep.
It's rooted in defense and battle. That's all that it is. And their penalty killing in this series was lights out.
And by the way, if you've never watched playoff hockey before, specifically Carolina Hurricanes playoff hockey, there is not a single coach in the league that's more entertaining come the postseason than Rod Brindamore, because he is. First of all, the man's lips stick out past his nose. He's the most expressive man on the face of the planet. When he gets those big old lips going, when he looks unpleasant, he looks so unpleasant that you don't want to talk to him. And Lord knows you don't want to fight him because the man is in ridiculous shape.
Have you seen clips
stupid.
of them on road trips or whatever, and he's up at 5:30 in the morning doing his own workout first before
he's in better shape than half the players.
Sure he is.
If he ever plays in an alumni event, he's taking heads off. 100%.
But regardless, this is a really well built team. It's a really well coached team. Obviously,
it's the kind of team. So okay. Losing a superstar is always going to hurt. If Mitch Marner goes down for Toronto, they're a worse team. If Jack Hughes goes down for the Devils, they're a worse team. If Leon Draisaitl goes down for the Oilers, they're a worse team. Pick your team. But out of all the teams in the league, based on the depth of the rest of their team as well as the system they play, I'm not sure there's a franchise better built to withstand the loss of a superstar than the Carolina Hurricanes. And they really showed that in this series because their depth was excellent. Their goaltending was excellent. Their defense was excellent.
And this is all stuff.
They didn't need Andrei Svechnikov. Like, yes, it would have been great, and obviously it would have made it a little easier, but they won cleanly without him. And
yeah, I mean, and the thing is we've said all of these things before about this team.
For the last 3 or 4 years, to be honest.
But the playoffs is where you really step up and show it. That I don't want to make it seem like the Islanders didn't give them a battle. I mean, you're in same thing. No. You're in a game 6, and one bounce is going to send this thing to game 7. So good for them for getting the bounce and winning. Because again, it was another kind of crazy goal. It was a turnover, throw it from a bad angle, and throw it from a bad angle and see what happened. And for the real shame of it was Ilya Sorokin, who had played brilliantly throughout the series, was really the Islanders' best player for a lot of it.
Yeah,
it probably lets in one that he stops 99% of the time and kind of because it was it's kind of Leighton-esque, if you will. It was from an angle and it was off the pads and it goes right through the wickets, and it's that kind of goal, but that's how it goes sometimes. And you got to take, of all things too, by the way, a Paul Stastny goal assisted by Derek Stepan off a turnover.
Yep.
What year are we in?
Like,
this is the same thing as Tyler Seguin scoring all those goals for Dallas too. It's like, what year is this?
Fair enough. But unfortunately, the Islanders do fall. The Carolina Hurricanes move on, and the team that it certainly looks like they're going to face. There's about 3 minutes left in this Game 7 as we're recording here. The New Jersey Devils have just scored into the empty net to go up 4-0.
I think we're safe.
So this series, man, I said that Edmonton LA was the nastiest series in the playoffs, and I do stand by that. Man, this one might be close. This series has been mean. This series feels like two teams that are 30 miles from each other, or whatever the gap is.
Yeah.
The Rangers win the first 2 on the road, and I'll be honest, I was fully expecting them to walk through. They came in and they looked like they were gonna big brother the New Jersey Devils and win in 4 or 5.
What a weird series this has been, and I say this because
it is the third series in this playoffs with 3 different situations of a goalie switch. All 3 played out differently. All 3 played out to massively different results. This one clearly played out the best. Akira Schmid was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
In Game 3, in Game 4, in Game 5, and in Game 7.
Well, and here's the reasoning behind it, because, or not the reasoning, but this is the reason behind the way the series goes the way that it kind of does, because the Rangers outscored the Devils in the first 2 games 10-2, and then the Rangers score 1-1-0, and okay, Game 6 they get kind of back on it and score 5,
yep.
And in another 2 minutes, unless it maybe
don't you dare say it. Rangers fans will be coming after us, or Devils fans will be coming after us for months.
Well, but you get the point. You get the point for where everything currently is.
And regardless, they're still going to win the game.
Exactly.
It won't be more than 1.
But you're right. No, you're right. The first two games and the way that went, I had them on they were on the ropes. I had the Devils on the ropes.
It looked like a team that made the Eastern Conference Finals last year versus a team that hadn't made the playoffs since Taylor Hall was there. And that's what it was.
Right.
And it's fully, yes, the team rallied around them, but it is fully Akira Schmid. He is, coming out of the first round, he is my early Conn Smythe vote. If you're talking about across the 8 series, he has to be the player that's had the single biggest impact on turning a series around.
He definitely had a big impact. I'm just trying to think of.
And then the numbers he put up, take out Game 6, his goals against is below 1. Significantly below 1.
I just wonder, the issue that I'm gonna have with this is, okay, he definitely did it in the Rangers series. You face a totally new team, things can change. I don't know yet. You know what I mean? I just don't know if it's going to carry for that long, because there's plenty of players you can argue are most valuable to their team.
That's fair.
and could still be over, whatever. So
let's start talking about the second round matchups, and I think we double back. I think we start
no, but by the way,
here where we are.
So real quick, because I don't want to just gloss over like the Rangers portion of this too and all that stuff like that, because it's like, man, just
it's really disappointing.
I'm going to make a prediction right now, and it's not really it's not really going out on a limb here because I've seen it a lot. Oh yeah, I think he's fired after this.
When you add with minimal reduction from your roster, Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko, and you go out in the first round, somebody's got to get fired. And I don't think anybody made a mistake necessarily. I mean, you can make some arguments about things Gerard Gallant did in the series and, certain decisions he made. But as far as, the front office goes, I think you acquire these players 100 times out of 100 when they become available. Like, I don't think you redo any decisions that the front office made during the year. It's just unfortunate that, you couldn't get it done in the postseason.
Exactly. And it's, it's just always like playoff series. You can't give teams life. You just can't give teams new life. And you're sitting, and this is another one of those bounce games because you're in an overtime in game 3, and the Rangers can make it 3-0 in the series, and it's a way closer game this time. And the Rangers are at home too, so they win 2 games on the road and then go home and watch it all deteriorate from there. And I can officially say it now. Shut out. Yep. Shut out.
Akira Schmid with a Game 7 shutout to eliminate the New York Rangers, and just like that, thousands of Akira Schmid jerseys sell.
That's incredible, but that's insanely impressive.
Incredible.
Is it not?
Incredible.
1-1-0-5-0.
Incredible.
7 goals in 5 games will do it.
Yeah, and it's not even that. Not really. It's 2 goals in 4 games. 2 goals in
4 that you didn't
with
win.
1 bad game dispersed in there.
Yeah.
And,
wow.
Yeah, but all right. With that being said, let's bounce on to some predictions here, and let's start here in the Metro.
Okay, let's bring this up.
Devils Hurricanes. Now, we talked about the Hurricanes being a tough defensive team, and obviously we are asking for instant feedback. This Devils game, we're literally talking during the handshake line. So, for the record, if you're looking for your quickest analysis, you got it live here right on You Would Think. So make sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast.
We're giving our quickest analysis immediately after the game's over. It won't be heard until the morning probably, but
but regardless, so we have the Devils who will be going on the road. Game 1 will be in Raleigh.
Yep.
Man, it's hard given where we're at, given the postseason and the fact that Carolina has this stalwart defense, and it seems like they've kind of got it running on all cylinders right now. It's really hard to pick against Carolina Hurricanes here. I don't know what you think.
I mean, this is an interesting one. The thing I think about this is New Jersey can't afford to fall behind in this series because Carolina is going to be way more careful about.
If you give them 2 games like you give the Rangers, pack your bags.
Exactly. And there's also an element for me of, the Rangers and the Devils had to play the Rangers, finish the series off. They play, they just played tonight as we talked about while we're recording. So that was Monday. They played Saturday, and Carolina's been sitting there at home since probably after, at the very least since Saturday morning, right?
Yep.
And just waiting for who's next. So I think the fact that the Devils played 2 extra games, we'll see. I mean, that can help you and it can hurt you in game 1.
I don't think it hurt. I don't think it hurt you in the first round going into the second.
I don't think it hurts a team like Carolina and the kind of coaching that they go through. But I think that it's at least something you have to watch for the first 10 minutes.
I agree.
And
fair.
So we will see. I still think Carolina's the better team. I think, the funny part is I, from the get-go, just off of the first round predictions, had the Rangers winning the series against New Jersey, and then had the
Me
Rangers
too.
beating Carolina.
So I did have Carolina winning in the second round, but I did also have the Rangers getting through. So it is interesting now that the Devils are sitting there.
So, well, you see, so for you, this is easy. You're going to keep everything the way it is.
I'm
So
gonna
Carolina's
keep
winning.
Carolina. I think it's 6 games. Yeah, man. So I think it's 6 games, but I'm leaning more towards 5, honestly. Maybe I'm an Akira Schmid doubter. Maybe, but I just don't see. I don't see Carolina allowing the kind of space that the New York Rangers allowed for the Jack Hughes and the Nico
Yeah.
Hischier and all that kind of thing. And quite frankly, I feel good about my first round prediction because I mentioned that the biggest, most impactful Ranger was going to be Jacob Trouba. And his biggest impact might have been the status of Timo Meyer heading into the second round.
Well, Meyer came back.
Did he? He came back.
He was at least on the bench by the end of the game.
Oh my goodness
I know.
gracious!
So I'm not.
Was that me in the crowd there for a second? Sorry. There's a guy who looked just like me. That was
really
weird.
Funny. Cue up the Spider-Man meme. Yeah. Right. So I'm similar to you, but different from you at the same time in this. I'm going to pick Carolina as well.
Okay.
And I'm also going to say Carolina in 6.
Are you more on the 7-game side of things?
I'm teetering towards 7. There's some vibes going on now with the Devils. You know, you got when you're down 2-0 in a series and you got to win 4 out of the next 5 to make it.
I get that.
There's a little bit of vibes going on, and you know what? The goalie that nobody thought would be winning the playoff series, that just won the playoff series, has them vibing pretty good too, I would say. So I think that plays a factor.
And for the record, I'm not saying the Hurricanes are going to blow them out of the water. I just think that every game might be 1-0, but I don't see the Rangers the Devils getting a whole lot of goals by Frederik Andersen.
And do you know what's
Antti Raanta or whoever ends up in that?
Do you know what's interesting for me about this one too? The Rangers and the Hurricanes share something in common that the Devils don't have yet with their group, which is experience. Both of those teams have more experience than the Devils will by the end of this year. There's just no way.
Yep.
But the Rangers also have a lot of players who are on the older end. You know, you're not bringing in spring chickens in Tarasenko and Kane.
Right.
You know, you're bringing in guys with mileage who may not have been completely healthy by the end of the year. Who the hell knows, right? I feel the exact opposite about Carolina. And I'm not saying that they don't have older guys. Because Stastny and Stepan and, you know, and Brent Burns are doing stuff. But who's carrying the play? It's Aho and Nakash and Jarvis and,
Fast and the young guys. Yep.
And Kokaniemi, like you said, who's on the younger side and, you know, all that type of, it still comes down to that. And that, to me, is going to make a little bit of a difference because now you don't just have to counter. I believe that the Rangers were a team that not only had the experience factor there in terms of, yes, look at all this experience they got, look at all these veterans.
Right.
I think they play more methodical than fast. And I think that as structured as Carolina plays, they play fast structure.
Absolutely.
So I think the speed adjustment may be a challenge. It's almost like the Rangers knew that there's a playoff speed from the regular season speed, and they gave it to the Devils in the first 2 games of the series. And then the Devils figured out, in game 3, oh, this is how we have to play these games. And then they got it figured out, and all of a sudden they were faster and better. And I don't think that's going to be the way it is with Carolina. I just don't see it happening that way.
Fair enough. All right, so we both have Carolina in 6, but kind of on opposite sides of 6, as it were. Yep. The other matchup in the East is a good one, and we touched on it briefly earlier. It is the Toronto Maple Leafs that just got over the hump and won their first series in almost 20 years against the Florida Panthers, who probably just kind of expelled all their energy to pull everything out to beat the Bruins. You know, you're down 3-1. They played 3 back-to-back-to-back win or go home games. You know, this is a desperate team that's been emptying the tank for, quite frankly, about 6 weeks now. At some point, it's got to fall off, but it hasn't yet. Where are you at on this one?
Definitely a long series. Definitely a battle because you're going to have, I mean, you've got two teams that are feeling great about what they've just accomplished. One that finally got past the first round. The other one that just took out the best team in the league this year that was like by a mile and did it in comeback fashion.
Yep.
So
overtime,
now,
game 7. Crazy.
So now what? Like, I don't know who comes into this with an edge. I guess Toronto, for not having to play a game 7, comes in with an edge. I mean, they also
definitely an extra couple of
days.
Well,
Toronto has 2 advantages going in right off the bat. They didn't have to play a game 7, and they're going to get to play on home ice as opposed to going on the road like everybody thought they were going to have to do. Instead, they get to play at home. That matters, and I think that could even be exactly what sways the series a little bit. I'm going Toronto in 7.
Wow, Toronto in 7. Okay.
Because I just can't overlook. We talked a lot about the Bruins when we were talking about that Florida-Boston series because of the epic proportions of what happened to Boston. I don't want to discount the way Florida did it because it came from everywhere. Tkachuk was outstanding. And Montour had another great series. Verhaeghe had a great series. Like, they got it from all over the place. And then down to when you're watching Game 6, season on the line, and who is scoring game-tying goals? Zach Dalpe. And who's scoring a game-winning goal? Eetu Luostarinen. Like, and you made a goaltending change halfway through for a guy who, as far as I'm concerned, has accomplished everything he can in the regular season and throws his body around like nobody's business. That at his current age, I don't know how he's still able to do it to an extent, but he's still doing it. So I'm not writing off this Florida team in 5 games against a team like Toronto just because Toronto finally got past, the demons, and now they're going to, go through a team that should be, that everybody thought was going to be out of the playoffs in Game 5. I'm not going to do it.
So my thing with this series, it's not just that Toronto won and that Toronto got over the hump. It's how and who from Toronto. So going to that 4-1 game, the comeback goals. It's Matthews from Marner and Nylander. And then Matthews from Nylander and Giordano. And then Riley from Marner and O'Reilly. And then Kerfoot from Giordano and Nylander.
Yeah. It's the core. It's the whole core.
Those are the guys that when the coach says we got to get the big guys going, that's them. That's them. And then you go to Game 6, and I know we touched on this briefly earlier. But it was Matthews from Brody, and then in overtime it's Tavares from Nyes and Riley, and like Tavares, Riley, and Matthews again. There's your core.
Austin Matthews has scored in 4 straight games coming into this series too.
Yeah,
and
so to me, you have the big guns running. Ilya Samsonov has looked perfectly serviceable, and oh, by the way, Matt Murray practiced today, so he is potentially available as an option at some point if you need him. We're in the playoffs, so Matt Murray, you never know.
Yeah, I heard he's number 3 still, because I assume that would be
absolutely.
I assume it would be Samsonov and then Joseph Wall, and then yeah.
But regardless,
great name for a goaltender, right?
Fair, right? Nickname Brick.
Yeah.
So you do have him as a theoretical option, but to me, you have the big guns running. And then on the other side, again, you got a team in the Florida Panthers that have just been playing meaningful games for so long
that you start to worry about it a little.
Right. And the Toronto Maple Leafs have been here before, kind of. They've been to the first round before. Mm-hmm. They know what the first round takes out of you. So in the weeks leading up to the postseason, we saw them resting guys. We saw them utilizing some different lineups. We saw them utilizing a pretty heavy rotation. Resting guys.
Yep.
They should, in theory, be more well-rested, better prepared physically for the second round. Because, like I said, Florida has been hanging it all out there since 3 weeks to go in the regular season. Because that's what they needed to do to make a push. I think the Toronto team that showed up in Game 6 was closer to the regular season Toronto team.
Mm-hmm.
And that Toronto team was 20 points better than the Florida Panthers. So that's kind of where I'm at on this series. I have Toronto in 5.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. And maybe I doubt how much a goalie matters, and maybe Sergei Bobrovsky is, he's on. Maybe he's here to stay. He's ready to go. But I don't know, man. I just think the Leafs they look too powerful, too dominant.
The thing that's going to happen now, and like I said, because there's a lot of people that are going to sit there and say, as a result of what happened for Toronto, that everything, like the stars are aligning. They finally have done it, to get past the first round. It's their year. I just think Florida's heard it all before and wants to have a say in that. That's all. And I still have Toronto advancing, and I think that if we end up right about the team, at least, length is debatable, obviously, but if we end up right about the team, what a conference final that sounds like. Carolina and Toronto.
Carolina, Toronto, man. And we've seen it before. Carolina wins a couple playoff rounds. That town gets up. Raleigh turns into a hockey town when the Canes are making a run. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm
going to make a whole footnote thing at the end of this because the whole way the first round played out, stuff just keeps getting interesting around the league. So
So two more series to talk about here out west. You want to do Seattle and Dallas first?
Sure.
Okay. I talked about this a little bit earlier. Maybe I'm a Seattle hater here. I if you've been listening to this show for a while, I've been talking all season long about Miro Heiskanen and Jason Robertson. I've been talking for a couple of years about your Rope Henses, and I have the Dallas Stars in. Man, this is the interesting one because I think Seattle's a good team. It's going to come down to Philip Grubauer and just how long he can continue just being stellar, and he has been absolutely stellar during these playoffs. I'll take the Dallas Stars in 6 games, but I wouldn't be surprised. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised with any result out of this series because it's just that time of year. It's going to be such a good series. I'm very excited to see how it plays out.
I definitely am too. I'm not going to discount Seattle anything with the way that with the way that they just played. They took down the defending champs. Anything is possible. But I think that Dallas is just built the right way. I think that there's elements of that team that kind of uncharacteristically made it to the Stanley Cup final a few years ago because it was we all know how weird that year was. But when you consider that was still early for Miro Heiskanen and before Ottinger and all that type of stuff when they were in the final last anyway, I'm going off the same thing that I felt with the first round, which just was like I had it going 7 originally against Minnesota, and my thought was Ottinger's not losing this time. Like the guy who keeps them in it the most isn't losing this time. And boy did he, he sure didn't after game 3, did he?
He turned it up.
So I had Dallas advancing either way. I had Dallas advancing if it was Colorado, to be honest, because I really think that I think Dallas is built for this right now.
Yep.
I'm also going to say 6.
Okay.
I'm very eager to see how Seattle looks at the beginning because you know what? That's really going to be a telltale sign for me is, I knew Seattle was for real in the series against Colorado the second that I watched how they were playing out game 1. Once game 1 was over, I'm like, all right, this isn't going to be an easy,
they were not there to be pushed around by the former champions. They were there to prove their place as a playoff team in the NHL.
Because let's be real about something for a second, okay? Dave Hackstall teams that get to the playoffs. No, when he was in Philadelphia, how did it typically tend to go? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Washington series was the first one. They lost the first 3 games, then they won 2, then they lost game 6. And it
And
was
then there were some
close.
bracelets.
No, but hold on. And game 6 was a 1-0 final, and it was really close. But it doesn't matter. It wasn't the same. You know, it was one team. It was still kind of men against boys in a 1-0 game somehow. And against Pittsburgh in 2018, they lost. They lost game 1, won game 2, lost 3 and 4, won game 5 miraculously, and then lost game 6. Had Pittsburgh on the ropes in game 6, but lost it ultimately. Right. So, if Seattle would have followed the same script against Colorado, lost game 1, shows you they can play, then loses 2 more, then maybe I feel like. And that's the thing about, that's why I said it, when they won game 4 in overtime, that's when it felt different. Because all of a sudden you're going, oh, you're not playing the 3-1 down 3-1 game where you got to somehow or other win 3 games in a row. Now it's
Right,
we're
where your
starting
back's
over
up against the wall. Right.
We're starting over best of 3. And guess what? You've played hard enough that you could have really won. Like, you could have won game 3.
Yeah, and absolutely they could have. Yep. Seattle is definitely not a bad team. Like, I'm not discounting them. It kind of feels to me how the Rangers Devils series felt in the East in the first round. It's the team that's been there before against the team that's kind of playing with house money at this point. And similar to Toronto, Florida, it's, well, you know, is it the juggernaut that should win? Right. At this point, I'm willing to call Dallas that team, that juggernaut. Just with the complete package they've put together. Miro Heiskanen had an incredible season. It feels like a very similar dynamic in the matchup, and I wouldn't be surprised if either one of the underdog teams there wins. If either Seattle or Florida ends up winning their second round matchup, but
exactly.
But if you play these matchups 100 times, I think the better team wins 95 of them. So it's hard to pick against Dallas.
Well, and because you hit the nail on the head, you've got 2 teams that are absolutely playing with house money at this point that are already farther than anybody thought they would be.
Yep.
You've got one series that we haven't done on the West side.
And we'll be getting into that in just a second.
That is as even as it gets in terms of like there is no expectation. There is no one team should make it over the other kind of. It's like either way, it's going to make sense, isn't it?
The Western Conference Final, regardless of whether Seattle shocks the world and makes it through, or if Dallas kind of wins as expected, regardless, it's going to set up a fun matchup, no matter who comes out of the other matchup too.
Yeah, for real. It really will. But the thing is I can't put any label on Carolina, New Jersey, because there's a little element of it of, well, New Jersey kind of is playing with house money too, because nobody really thought they were, like, even as a 2 seed, nobody thought they were winning the series, especially after the first 2 games against the Rangers.
Yeah, it's a little different though than the 4 seeds beating the 1s, especially the ones they beat.
Which is
talking
why,
about the best regular season team in history and the defending Stanley Cup champion.
Which is why I'm venturing also on, like, teetering on the side of, well, you know what? Carolina and New Jersey is the 2 best teams in the Metro all year that were close at the very end. Either one could win, and I would get it.
Absolutely.
So,
all right,
we'll see.
One more matchup, and it might be the most fun of the second round. This is Vegas and Edmonton. So I'm gonna start this one with what I said in the group chat after Edmonton advanced over LA. Now that he doesn't have to play against Philip Deneau and Anze Kopitar, the Connor McDavid show is about to begin.
Okay.
And I know what you're going to say. I know you're going to say that Mark Stone plays for the Vegas Golden Knights. But guess what? There's only one of him. And also name a single Vegas Golden Knights defenseman that's good at defense.
I hear you there.
I'll wait for you to tell me it's Shea Theodore. Okay.
Braden McNabb. No.
So when I talk about the Carolina New Jersey series, if it had been Carolina and the Rangers, it might have been a whole lot of 1-0, 2-1, 2-0 games. Mm-hmm. This series is going to be all 8-7, 7-5, 4-1. Like this series.
Yeah, wait. So what was
what
was the score of Game 1 between Calgary and Edmonton?
I think it was 8-6.
8-6, right?
And this is gonna feel a lot like that.
And then Game 5, when Edmonton won the series, was 6-5 in overtime. You're setting up for this.
I am expecting it now, and it'll tighten up a little bit as the series goes on, just because that's how the playoffs.
No,
work.
but do you want to know do you know what's interesting about your point? The goaltenders aren't the headliners here. You got two guys who are playing well, but they're not the headliners. You're not exactly sitting here. You know, if we look at the rest of these, I mean, you're kind of Samsonov against Bobrovsky is a decent matchup. Obviously, it's a good matchup, and Ottinger Grubauer can be good.
Yeah, but you know what's really fun and spicy?
What's that?
If Vegas decides to mix things up in net a little bit and they throw Mr. Jonathan Quick in there, come on. But I know if LA had won.
If it was LA, it would have been more spicy.
But we might see all four goalies in that series.
I wouldn't be shocked.
In Edmonton, Vegas, absolutely.
I wouldn't be shocked if Jonathan Quick and Jack Campbell made appearances. Absolutely.
So this series sounds incredibly fun, but Kevin, who you got?
Well, I got to stick with where I started, because this is one that I got 3 out of 4 teams right in the Western Conference, and my Western Conference final was still intact when all of this was over.
Okay.
So I've got to stick with what I picked from the beginning. I got Edmonton in 7.
Okay.
I absolutely 1,000% believe this is going to be a 7-game series.
I don't disagree with you. I think this series, out of all the matchups in the second round, so like we looked at the first round and there were all these incredible matchups and most of them lived up to it. And it was a really great first round. Looking at this second round, I think the Metro looks like it could be maybe a little bit low event. The other two could be swingy depending on what kind of team shows up. I think this one has the potential to be the most fun playoff matchup we've had in a long time.
Definitely.
So you also have Jack Eichel versus Connor McDavid as a little bit of an underrated storyline.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the fun stuff of this, because this is what happens out of the first round. I just want to, and I didn't eliminate one team yet.
Evander Kane has to successfully manage multiple nights in Las Vegas. Like, there's a lot of storylines in this series.
Oh, there's definitely a lot of storylines. The thing I always like to do when the playoffs begin is look at the 16 teams that made it and start going through when they last won, right? If ever. Because there's always some charm to the team that's never won it before, right? And we are now down to 8 teams left.
Right.
And within 24 hours, or a little bit more than a 24-hour period, the 3-time defending Eastern Conference champions were eliminated. The President's Trophy winning, record-setting regular season team was eliminated. And the defending Stanley Cup champions were eliminated.
And a team that made the Eastern Conference Finals was eliminated.
And now the team that made the Eastern Conference Finals against the defending 3-time Eastern Conference champions has also been eliminated. That means that the most recent Stanley Cup champion that is still alive in the playoffs are the Carolina Hurricanes from 2006. That's a 17-year drought.
Yeah, we're going to be breaking some droughts this offseason.
This is where it gets even crazy. This is where it gets even crazier. You have that drought. New Jersey's is 20 years from 2003. Dallas's is 24 years from 99. And then you go back to 1990 for Edmonton, 1967 for Toronto, obviously.
And obviously Seattle and Vegas.
And 3 teams with none.
Wait. Seattle, Vegas, and
Florida.
Okay, that's right.
And I just want to let's play this one out, because so Vegas is playing Edmonton. That's a team that has never won the cup. Now, has only also been in the league since 2017.
Right.
So it's not a long history. I know we're going to say the same with Seattle, but still. So you got Vegas, who's never won it, going against the team in
By the way, we do still need your official prediction for that series. Like we are still
for which one? For Vegas Edmonton? I said
Yeah.
I said Edmonton in 7.
Did you say Edmonton in 7? Okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know if I said it as well. I do also.
You did. We both agreed because we both said it's going the distance.
I do also have Edmonton. I do think it goes 7, but okay.
So Vegas, who's never won it, going against Edmonton, who hasn't won since 1990. 33 years. Dallas, 1999. Against Seattle, never in 2 years, obviously, but also like if you go back through the ancient history of Seattle hockey, I'm not going all the way that far, but the point is that it was a long time before Seattle had a hockey team again. So now it's back, and it's like that's why it's a big deal, right? So you have the possibility staring you in the face right here of two teams that are the two most recent expansions who have never won a Stanley Cup, playing for a shot to go for the Stanley Cup. Or you've got another possibility here, which is to keep the All Canada Stanley Cup final alive with Edmonton.
Man,
and I'm not throwing.
You
and I'm not trying to.
Sportsnet wants that.
And I'm not just throwing Dallas out the window by not really mentioning them for anything. But you know what? Right. You know what's cool about Dallas in this? They've only got one.
Yep.
The one that we talk about is the one they've got.
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah, by the way, okay, for people watching on YouTube, can you see where my finger's going? Do you see what that is?
Yep.
That's the moment that we're talking about.
Yep.
And then you go to this matchup on the East, Florida, who's never won, against the drought, Toronto.
Yep. Wild. One of those two teams is going to be in the conference finals.
Correct.
Yep.
And then the two most recent teams to win are now playing each other, so one of them's gone.
Knocking one of them out, too. We love that. That is what we love.
The beautiful game.
The playoffs are the best 8 weeks of the year, for sure.
So,
without a doubt.
Just imagine, and obviously, like I already hinted at the other part of it, which is, can you imagine if we were to get Toronto, Edmonton, or like there are tons of matchups here that just would be brilliant. Toronto, Edmonton, Vegas, Seattle in the conference final would be something.
Toronto, Vegas? Oh my God.
Toronto, Vegas.
Think about the spectacle.
How about Dallas, New Jersey, the two coaches who used to coach in the other place?
That is fun.
That would be fun.
Give me Edmonton, Florida. Give me the worst flight possible Stanley Cup final matchup.
Well, I was gonna say, give me Florida, Seattle, Florida, Seattle. Go cross country.
I mean, Edmonton's right there too.
I know. Or you go Florida, Vegas. Either way, you would be getting.
But you got to go cross country and go through.
Oh no, I'm just picking those
and go through 3 time zones.
I'm just picking I was just picking Florida and either Vegas or Seattle, and that because of guaranteed first timer.
And then how about the kill the NHL matchup? We got Carolina and Dallas. The network sob. ESPN sobs.
Is that the one that kills it, or is it Dallas, Florida?
Dallas. Yeah, you're right. All right.
You already know what the dream is. The dream is Toronto, Vegas, or Toronto, Edmonton.
Absolutely.
At this point, best market that's left on the Eastern Conference side is Toronto, and you can take your pick between one of the two expansions and Edmonton. I mean, look, I think Dallas is a good hockey market. Don't get me wrong. I actually think it is a really good hockey market.
Yep.
Just, it's just, what the best match. And oh, by the way, I also have a vote for a great coaching matchup in the final.
Okay.
Give me Carolina, Vegas.
Oh yeah.
Give me Rod Brindamore and Bruce Cassidy.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. So the good news is, okay, we got good news and bad news. Which one do you want first? You want the bad news first?
Sure, let's do the bad news.
The bad news is that brings us to the end of today's show.
Yes, that is the bad news.
The good news is that even for our next show, which will be after this upcoming round, we will still only be halfway through the playoffs. So we will be back in approximately 2 weeks after this second round wraps up. We'll let you guys know, as we get a little closer. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us over there. Subscribe to us or follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Find the show everywhere you find your podcast: Facebook, Instagram, etc. SportsTalkPhilly.com. Make sure to check us out over there. A lot of great coverage over there for all your Eagles, Phillies, Sixers, etc. There's coverage on absolutely everything over there. Kevin, what series are you most looking forward to over the next 2 weeks?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's a good one to get out of here on. I think I'm personally the most excited for Vegas and Edmonton.
I think matchup-wise, that's the one I'm looking the most forward to, but I can probably pull, like, really quick, I can probably pull one thing from each, because I'm looking forward to another run of home games for Seattle. I'm kind of looking forward to whatever Toronto's got in a second round, that kind of thing. I think Carolina, New Jersey is going to be an intense series more than people think. That's what I'm looking forward to. But I think you're right. Vegas and Edmonton's the most.
I think it'll be the most fun hockey
behind it. And hey, by the way, if you don't want to wait for my thoughts on the show for 2 weeks, follow the Instagram page. Or by the way, my handle is also for my own YouTube channel as well. You can follow me there too, because I've been posting those. They've been doing pretty well, actually. I'm not gonna lie. Some of these little quick 60-second hits that you can throw out there, they've been doing pretty well. So
Kevin's gonna be an influencer by the end of the playoffs. Let's go, baby.
I hate myself a little bit for it.
All right. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We'll be halfway through the playoffs. We're on our way to crowning a Stanley Cup champion. We'll see you in a couple weeks.